Okay, I think we're there. I think we got it. All right, let me just make sure. Cool, live streaming now. Hello, everyone. We are live. Yep, we're up, we're live, fantastic. Thursdays, this time, 8 a.m. Pacific time, what is that, 11 o'clock Eastern time is when I will be going live for these healthy conversations. I had to switch it around in my schedule. Apologies for that. So anybody who wants to jump on live can do so on the Facebook group. You can also do so in the Zoom group, which some of you are in. And the link for the Zoom group is in the invitation on the Facebook invitation. If you are watching from Mighty Network, because you don't do Facebook, which is totally fine, you can also find the invitation for the Zoom group in the Mighty Network links as well. Okay, here we are live. Healthy Conversations on Thursdays at 8 a.m. Pacific time. So today's conversation is about cognitive distortions and particularly black and white thinking. This came from one of my clients from last week, and it was such a powerful conversation that we had that I thought it was important and useful to share with you all. So, cognitive distortions are, well, it's just a fancy way of saying that it's a mindset or a way of thinking that is not working for you, that is maladaptive or not working for you. In the therapy world, we call them cognitive distortions. And the key in understanding cognitive distortions is that not only are they not, I'm going to say the word real, they're not real, they're not required. Let's call it that way. Let's put it that way. You can change your cognition. You can change the way that you think about things. Not only are they not real or not cemented, right? They're not permanent if you don't want them to be, but also they can be incredibly damaging because cognitive distortions lead to actual actions and behaviors. The way we think leads to the way we behave in many ways. So what I see most in my practice are people who are struggling with the cognitive distortion of black and white thinking, all or nothing thinking, right? There are many cognitive distortions. You can find a list of some of the most common ones in my book, but black and white thinking and all or nothing thinking can actually lead to detrimental behavior, detrimental actions. And here's what that looks like in my world, in the world of dieters or yo-yo dieters or people struggling with food. So if you have a mindset of black and white thinking, it looks something like this. I'm either on my diet or off my diet. I'm either on my plan or off my plan. I'm either doing well or I'm doing terribly. I'm either succeeding for the day or I'm failing. And you can hear in there that there's a lack of flexibility in that mindset, that there's a rigidity in that mindset that doesn't allow much room for error, right? Even in the definition of it, there's little to no room for error. And the way that this plays out in behavior looks like, for instance, maybe you eat a breakfast that feels nourishing to you and snack that feels nourishing to you and lunch that feels nourishing to you, but then something comes up, excuse me, I'm about to sneeze, real life. Okay, then something comes up and for whatever reason, you find yourself at Starbucks for a snack and you order something that you didn't intend to order, right? And if you are in the mindset of black and white thinking, then that singular decision of ordering something at Starbucks will often lead to a spiral of decision-making that causes you to overeat. And I'm going to talk about the paradox about that in just a second here. But what ends up happening is I've gone to Starbucks, I've ordered whatever, a cake pop or something, and that wasn't my plan for the day. And I feel frustrated about that. And I struggle with black and white thinking. And that leads to feeling like I have failed for the day. Why do I always do this? I failed. What's the point? What's the use? I'm off my plan. So it leads to oftentimes the what the heck response, which leads to whatever. Now I'm frustrated with myself for going off my plan. And so, I overeat at dinner. I overeat the dessert that I hadn't planned on eating, and I go to bed really frustrated. The mindset of I have failed leads to a string of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, which actually leads to over consuming or consuming more than if you would have had a flexible mindset in the moment where you chose the Starbucks. So here's where the paradox comes in. People who struggle with black and white thinking, often the rigidity in the thinking is meant to be a fail-safe. It's meant to be a way of cognitive protection, of saying, if I do this perfectly, that will protect me from failure, right? If I stay on my plan perfectly, if I write the report perfectly, if I'm, perfect in my marriage, if I'm perfect in my, right? If I do it right, then that will protect me from the emotions or the experience of failure. If I'm all on, it will protect me from failure, right? The irony of that is that people who are black and white in their thinking, especially when it comes to food and calorie consumption, people who are rigid and black and white thinking actually end up consuming more than people who have a more flexible way of thinking when it comes to food. That's where the irony comes in. The entire reason why you have black and white thinking is because you feel like you're protecting yourself from failure. You feel like you're protecting yourself from overeating. I'm protecting myself from failing at food, right? And yet those people are more likely to overconsume, that's the irony, than the people who have a more flexible view of this. So what does a more flexible mindset look like? In the example I gave with Starbucks, it would look something like, oh, I had a cake pop and a Frappuccino, and that maybe didn't make me feel as nourished as I'd like to feel. That wasn't in my plan for today. And I can practice looking at that as a singular event. That didn't feel great. What can I learn from that? How do I want to manage that in times ahead? But that was a singular event within a string of events of my day. What would I like to feel in my next meal? That's the tool I'm going to give you here in a second. But if you're able to stay more flexible, you are able to look at that meal as its own isolated event. And then you're able to look into the future of what you want to feel in your next meal, right? So I'm able to leave that isolated event as what it is and not carry that behavior into my next decision, right? So I'm able to look at that. And my next meal, I'm able to say, okay, how would I like to eat this meal that will make me feel nourished physically, mentally, emotionally at this meal? So as you can see, someone with a more flexible way of thinking about things is able to take that as an isolated event. And I don't even care if that isolated event happens every day, right? It's still just that event or decision. And when we leave it at that event or decision, and we don't carry it into our next meal with the black and white thinking, oh, I failed, I blew it, I can't believe I did that today, we are more likely to make decisions in our next meal that support who we want to be. So if you struggle with black and white thinking, here is my tool, my tip for you for today. It is to practice. And mind you, this does take practice. If you have a mindset of black and white thinking, it is going to take practice of a new way of thinking, a new way of being, and solidifying and firing and wiring that new thinking and way of being into your mindset. It's going to take practice. So it doesn't just happen overnight. I want you to think of it as practice. Oh, I'm going to practice this. And sometimes it's going to feel better. And sometimes it's it will feel terrible, like I'm no good at it, but I'm going to keep practicing it until it becomes second nature for me. So if you struggle with black and white thinking, my tool for you for today is to practice keeping each meal or food decision or snack decision or whatever. Every decision you make around food is an isolated event, not connected to the decisions before it. So breakfast is breakfast, a snack is a snack, lunch is lunch, snack is a snack, dinner is dinner, however you eat. Maybe you eat one meal a day, I don't care. Each decision around food is an isolated event. And your practice is on asking in that isolated event, how do I want to feel after I'm done with this meal? Doesn't matter how I felt after last meal. Doesn't matter how I'm going to feel after the next meal. This meal, how do I want to feel? Now, don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that you never include anticipation of your next meals. For instance, if you know you're having, I'm going to be dramatic here, but if you know you're having Thanksgiving dinner, then you sometimes go lighter on the breakfast in the morning because you know that you're going to feel heavier throughout the day. That's not a restriction and deprivation. Sometimes we do make decisions like that. Or I'm traveling tomorrow to speak at a conference and I know I'll be on a plane for 4 hours. So I will probably have a snack or something before I get on the plane, knowing that I won't have access to food. We make decisions like that in anticipation of our environment all the time. But what I'm saying is, if you struggle with black and white thinking, you want to practice making each decision an isolated event so that you don't carry the emotions of your last decision into your next decision, okay? And that does take practice. So you do things like you ask yourself, what would feel nourishing to me at this meal? What feels aligned for me at this meal? What feels like an appropriate amount of food for me at this meal, right? And we don't pull strings like restricting it because last meal I did this, right? That's the thing that leads us to overconsumption, is when we pull in the emotions from our last meal, it changes how the decisions we make on this meal. So your practice is, how can I make each meal an isolated event that focuses on the emotions or the experience that I want to have at this meal and leave from this meal only. Hope that was helpful for you. Just check in the comments here, making sure you don't have any comments over on the live. Awesome. Keep sending me your questions. I will see you next week for next week's Healthy Conversations.